Why haven't we seen Iran's new supreme leader? It's been days since Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei was announced as the man to take over after his father was killed by a targeted Israeli airstrike. But we simply haven't seen him. There's been statements, he's even been on X, but no video. Is he so badly hurt, injured by the strike that killed his father, that he can't be seen on camera? So many questions. Hi there, Anthony Howard in the DW live studio here in Berlin. Let's bring in our guest for today, Hans-Jakob Schindler, on camera as I say that. There's so many questions, Hans-Jakob. If he is badly injured, is he really running Iran, or is he just the figurehead for whoever it is that is really in charge? Does it even matter, as one of my colleagues asked pertinently this morning, does it even matter to Iran if he's not in charge? Do they have a war cabinet? Is it just the Revolutionary Guard? So many questions. Hans-Jakob, do you think you can help us for a start?
I will try my very best. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. The reason we're speaking to you is that you've lived and worked in Tehran for many years. You've also been the Senior Director, Counter Extremism Project, former coordinator of ISIL and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban monitoring team for the United Nations Security Council. You are very, very well credentialed for this discussion. Can I just start by asking simply why you think we haven't seen him?
Look, I mean, very clearly something has happened on that day. Mojtaba Khamenei was the leader of the political office of the compound of the supreme leader of Iran. And that means if there is a high-ranking meeting of all the top generals with the supreme leader, very likely either Mojtaba Khamenei was in the meeting or close to the meeting, which means he is very likely injured. Because what the regime tried to demonstrate with the rather swift election of a new supreme leader is that it is resilient. However, that signal is eroding if you cannot even present a voice message from the supreme leader, and then you have the new supreme leader, and then you have to read out a statement that virtually anyone else could have formulated for him. Now, does it matter for the regime? Well, it matters for the regime because they have a name, that they now have a new supreme leader. However, the shots at the moment, of course, are called by the hardliners, the Espionage, the Revolutionary Guard, who had, from the very beginning, when there was a question about the next supreme leader, had made very clear, after it was clear that Khamenei is dead, had made very clear their preferred candidate is Mojtaba Khamenei. Hence, maybe for the Revolutionary Guard, it's very good if you have a supreme leader who is not at risk of making any decisions that you don't make for him.
Yeah, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said in an interview with a news agent that Mojtaba Khamenei is in good health and is fully controlling the situation. Is that so at the moment? Do we have any way of knowing if that's so?
I mean, maybe it would help really the foreign minister of Iran if he reads his own new media in Iran, who consistently call Mojtaba Khamenei John Boss, someone who has been injured at war. Now, we know he was not in the Iran-Iraq war. Which other war could have he possibly been injured if he was not injured before the latest military confrontation? So, yes, the foreign minister, of course, has to put on a brave face. That's his job. But the media in Iran, the actual regime-controlled media in Iran, calls him a injured in the war individual.
When I think about agile leadership models, I want to pull up what is our best understanding of the Iranian leadership model as we speak in our own time. It doesn't leap to mind as a particularly agile leadership model. How does Iran run normally, and do we know exactly how that structure has changed since? How have they had to adapt in the days since the supreme leader was taken?
Well, it may not be looking like it's agile, but it has two really distinct advantages to build a regime like this. It's not concentrated on one person, not even on the supreme leader's individual. It is characterized by collective decision-making mechanisms, which has two real advantages. Number one, it is far more resilient. So if the supreme leader gets killed, a new supreme leader gets elected, and everything continues as normal. But also it avoids usually crass miscalculations of the situation, because you will always have in this collective decision-making mechanisms various factions who interpret the problem at hand in a different way. So the key aspect here is the Supreme National Security Council, led by Ali Larijani, who is very confirmed still alive. And that brings together all power centers of the regime.
Just as a reminder, Mojtaba hasn't appeared publicly since his appointment on the 8th of March. His first public address was broadcast by state media on the 12th, but read by a presenter. If we think of this in military terms, Hans-Jakob, who's making the target decisions at the moment? Has there been any detectable change in how those targets are allocated? Militarily, there's a lot of people who will contend that the Revolutionary Guard are now have taken an outsized role, given that Iran is at war. Is that the case?
Well, the Revolutionary Guards used to be just one of the power centers, and it really was, on the one hand, Ali Khamenei, the father, who came in a pretty much similar position that Mojtaba is right now, if he's still alive, that he was not a religious heavyweight. He didn't have any intrinsic power within the regime when he took over the reins from Ayatollah Khamenei, the founder of the Republic. So what he did then after 1989, after his election, is to build up the Revolutionary Guard as his personal power center, because he appoints everyone, all the officers, including all the officers of the Revolutionary Guard, and the Revolutionary Guard report to him and not to the Minister of Defense. So that was one. And then Ahmadinejad, during his presidency 2005 to 13, really made the Revolutionary Guards rich. In addition, the Revolutionary Guards were given some very exclusive responsibilities that are not in any way responsibility of any other security services. For example, the security in all of the border provinces of the country of Iran, in the Kurdish areas, in the Arab-speaking areas in the south, west of the country, all along the border of Afghanistan. That's exclusively the Revolutionary Guards, as well as the security, or now insecurity, of the Strait of Hormuz, and the responsibility for the nuclear program, and the exclusive responsibility of the rocket and drone program. Now, what they also have done about 20 years ago is to decentralize their command and control structure, because they were previewing, the regime was previewing a situation like this, a large-scale conventional attack by whomever, of course, especially by the Iranians, by the US, taking the lessons of what happened in Afghanistan and what happened in Iraq after the invasion of the international forces, decentralized their command and control structure in 31 command and control units that can operate independently. Their own weapon storage, own command and control structure, their own intelligence particles. So these are the ones that are shooting right now. But what they're shooting is exclusively what the Revolutionary Guard has. The army is actually not playing too much of a role in this conflict.
Clearly, Iran has been resilient in the days since the attack. I want to remind our audience that we are taking their questions as well, Hans-Jakob, on TikTok and both YouTube. We have audiences going as we speak. I know one of your fields of expertise, apart from having lived in Tehran, I'd love to know a little bit about that in the not-too-distant future. But what is Iran's abilities outside of their own borders at the moment? We hear a lot of cells or terror cells or the activities of Hezbollah. Do they still have the ability to be a threat outside of Iran at the moment? Should we still be taking them seriously?
Of course. Look, I mean, there is a conventional military side, and then there's the hybrid warfare side. The conventional military side, as you can clearly see, Iran is a nuisance. Yes, they can shoot rockets and drones. Yes, they can inflict some damage, but they are nowhere near in any way to inflict a conventional military defeat on Israel or the US. They knew that from the start. That's why they did reorganize their entire military doctrine. So what we see right now, the shooting at civilian infrastructure within the region, the harassment of ships in the Strait of Hormuz, the activation of their proxy network, Hezbollah has now joined the fight. That is what the Islamic Republic has said it would do in a case of a large-scale attack. So none of this is surprising. What is also really important, and whether he wrote that statement or it was written for him, of Mojtaba Khamenei, is that there is a small passage there in which he says, we are going to open new fronts in areas where our enemies, i.e. in this case the US and Israel, can really not effectively defend themselves, which new fronts could he possibly have met when they're already shooting at everyone in their neighborhood, including Azerbaijan, including Turkey? It can only refer to the attempted international terrorist attacks to drive up the political and economic costs of the US and Israel, so that they have to stop before the regime truly starts to collapse. We have seen a range of incidents and a new Shiite terror group that sprang out of nothing, but then all of a sudden starts posting their statements on the Pastaran Revolutionary Guard Telegram channel and the Hezbollah Telegram channel all of a sudden, right? No one usually gets to post there if you don't have close relationships. And they have taken responsibility for attacks on synagogues in Liège, in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam, and in Greece in the last couple of days. So we have to see whether this is independent operations and the Iranian side simply puts a ideological framework by announcing a new group, or whether there's actually a new group that has formed.
Hans-Jakob, a question from TikTok from Robert Z192. We've talked about Khamenei not appearing in public. Simply, the question here is, why hasn't Bibi Netanyahu appeared in public at this point?
Well, I mean, you can hardly get Bibi Netanyahu off the TV screens in Israel these days, right? He didn't have a classic press conference, but he's releasing videos several times a day. So I am under no illusion that Bibi Netanyahu may or may not be alive. He's very much alive. Yes, he hasn't done a classic press conference, but there is no question whether he's there or not. Now, I'm not saying that Mojtaba Khamenei would be likely to meet with 200 generals in a big meeting. That would simply be asking for those people to get killed at this particular point, because very clearly this regime is really undermined by a lot of people who give a lot of information to the Americans and the Israelis. But a voice message, to record a voice message instead of a letter and let that be played on state television, is the exact same amount of risk than if he has written the letter, writing a letter, and then asking someone to pick it up and bring it to the television station. Now, video, maybe there was a nervousness that they would be able to locate where he is. A voice message, you couldn't locate, as you would not be able to locate who or when that letter was written.
Another question I had relating to Netanyahu, the German news agency DPA is reporting, and several other outlets, Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard has threatened Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with death. In a statement published on Sunday by Iran's Fars and IRNA news agencies, that Netanyahu would be pursued and killed. Do they have the capability still to make that a reality, or at least, as you allude to, change Netanyahu's behaviour that they have to protect against those sort of threats?
I mean, this is not the first time that they threatened Israel as a country or the prime minister with death. They have tried to kill Donald Trump. There are several plots that were discovered, and people are now in prison because of that. So, of course, they're going to make an attempt. I just don't think that the Israeli government is quite as undermined with spies than the Iranian regime is at this point.
Right, just monitoring TikTok and YouTube. Just another reminder, you can get your questions in at the moment. One here from Adam. How long do you think Israel is going to stay with its current power structure, or, as Adam puts it, a dictatorship?
Well, I mean, it isn't a dictatorship because at the end of the year there is an election in Israel where, of course, Netanyahu is going to run. And that's the other timeline of this war. There is a midterm election in the United States, and then there is an election in Israel. Neither Bibi Netanyahu, who has also good personal reasons, because if he's no longer prime minister, he has a scheduled series of court cases for corruption allegations, none of which are going to go very well for him. And Donald Trump, as we all know, doesn't even like losing or admitting that he lost when he actually lost. So there is a political timeline here that closes about late summer this year, where we're going to the hot phase of either one of the elections. And that's when I would assume, at the very latest, major military attacks by Israel and the US on Iran will slow down or cease to exist, if it even goes that long.
One thing of interest that has captured the internet's interest anyway since the start of the war, Hans-Jakob, has been the return of these broadcasts that sound out of Iran that sound more like they're coming out of Cold War times, known as number stations. Are you aware of these reports that they have picked back up again?
Look, I mean, there was an American newspaper report that there were intercepts. By the way, it is actually not Cold War technology, it's Second World War technology. Right. But it is true that the Stasi did actually guide its espionage network in West Germany at the time through exactly the same method, i.e. radio broadcasts that then read blocks of numbers. This is very, very old technology. That's why I think it's actually quite credible that someone in the American intelligence community has briefed journalists that they have intercepted that, because it's such an old technology. It is usually intelligence services don't talk about what they intercept and how they intercept it, but that is such old technology developed in the Second World War that really there's no harm in admitting that you intercepted that. What that means and what the results of that is yet unclear. So far, we only had really one clearly identifiable attack that is linked to Iran, but by a very, very likely lone perpetrator. That was right after the beginning of the war on the 1st of March, a Senegalese individual, a migrant. I'm mentioning his nationality because it makes very clear he had no relationship to Iran, is not married to an Iranian, but with very clear sympathies for Ali Khamenei. He took a picture with him when he drove up to a bar in Austin, Texas, killed 3 people and injured 13. That's US soil so far. There have been attacks on the US embassy with a improvised explosive device in Oslo. No one was hurt. And a shooting incident at the US consulate in Toronto. No one was hurt there either. But it's not clear whether these were, again, inspired or guided attack. The Oslo bomb attack is 3 brothers, Norwegian citizens, but of Iraqi origin. So both is possible, a attack that Iran ordered, or simply individuals who are Shiites who felt that they had to do something. But we do have that string of attacks on synagogues where now, at least from the Iranian side, they're trying to insinuate that it's them.
We talked about these number stations that we've seen bob up on YouTube and other outlets to broadcast messages, and it being a World War II technology. Let's come into the current day and Iran's hacker network. We talk a lot about the influence of the Russian hacking farms, if you like. What capabilities does Iran have in this space? And what would be an example of what they've done previously? How seriously do we take them as a force?
Look, I mean, the Iranian hacking capabilities really started after the end of the Green Movement. The last attempt from within the regime after the fraudulent or at least highly problematic re-election of Ahmadinejad in 2009, that Green Movement predated the so-called Arab Spring and was really the first large-scale demonstration that was coordinated primarily via the internet and the beginning of social media, including Twitter. Now, once that movement was crushed, a lot of the very smart programmers who had been part of the Green Movement were, of course, arrested and then given a choice. You either can go for the rest of your life to Evin or some other very horrible prison in Iran, or you're now working for us, i.e. then the Iranian hacker army really started in earnest. They have been demonstrating very good capabilities when it comes to espionage, especially industrial espionage, while the way that the Russians are trying to do cyber espionage is they go in and they rip everything out. The Iranian strategies was always very deliberate and very careful, i.e. you plant software and then in a very slow, very deliberate pace, you exfiltrate data from the systems so that it's so slow that without luck, no one actually realizes that it's going on. What they've not been quite as capable of, well, they tried several times with Israel, they tried several times also with infrastructure in the United States, is to actually do sophisticated hacks on critical infrastructure. Didn't really work all the time. They are okay when it comes to DDoS attacks, so denial of distributed service attacks, where you basically flood a website with 1 billion requests every hour so that it just simply the server goes down. That's what they can. But to actually harm the cyber space that guides the critical infrastructure, they seem to not have the same capabilities than the Russians or the Chinese obviously have at this point.
I want to return, Hans-Jakob, to the health and the whereabouts of Mojtaba Khamenei. I want to play, if possible, the thoughts of Pete Hegseth. We've got people coming in to chat now who might have just joined the stream halfway through, and we're trying to ascertain why it is we might not have seen him. I want to take a listen to Pete Hegseth now, if we can.
We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. He put out a statement yesterday, a weak one, actually, but there was no voice and there was no video. It was a written statement. He called for unity. Apparently killing tens of thousands of protesters is his kind of unity. Iran has plenty of cameras and plenty of voice recorders. Why a written statement? I think you know why. His father, dead. He's scared, he's injured, he's on the run, and he lacks legitimacy. It's a mess for them.
That's Pete Hegseth there, we should point out, speaking a couple of days ago, Hans-Jakob. Firstly, your reaction to that style of language from an American, someone high up in leadership?
Look, I mean, this is not the first statement that Pete Hegseth has done. So, I mean, this is typical Pete Hegseth language and quite typical language for the current US administration. I mean, he is absolutely, correct in saying it's odd. I don't know if there is intelligence reports, whether or not he's injured. I have started with saying it's possible that he's injured. It's likely that it's injured, but we just simply don't know. Yet it remains a very odd fact that not even a voice message was recorded.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about what we know about the Khamenei family. And perhaps one thought that occurred to me while listening to Hegseth is that you lived in Tehran for some years. What effect do you think the American administration has on the current Iran, on this situation? There was a great hope from what we could tell or what we could gather from afar that the Iranian people were hoping that the US would come along and do this. Do you think attitudes to the US now might have changed over the course of the last 2 and a bit weeks?
Well, I was just able to speak to a couple of my former friends last night. And the fear is not the US. The fear is the US stopping.
Right.
It is very clear, and the regime has said on state television a couple of days ago that once this is over, we will take revenge. Do not feel safe. Everyone who has been critical over the last couple of weeks, whether he is in Iran or outside Iran, will pay a very, very heavy price. That's the official state media. And they said we will be more violent than we've been on the 8th of January. That's the day, 8th and 9th and 10th of January, where they killed thousands of their own citizens in the street. And it's hard to imagine how you could be even more violent, but very clearly in state TV, they said, we are going to be even more violent than those days. So the fear is not that there is targeted attacks against regime installations and headquarters of the Revolutionary Guards and headquarters of the Basij, i.e. these militia types that do the checkpoints all over the country now, or on rocket stations. The fear is that this war stops before the regime starts scrambling, and then really everyone will be in danger in Iran who has said one critical word of the regime. And if you're looking why there were these large-scale demonstrations, this was not about we need more freedom, we need a different system at the beginning in December. They started because the regime is no longer able to provide the basic necessities. Inflation is out of control. The middle class is very fast disappearing because they simply cannot afford their lives anymore. That's why you had this broad coalition coming out.
What is known about the Khamenei family and the money behind the family, Hans-Jakob? Bloomberg has reported about various properties alleged to be owned by the family. What do we know, and do we take seriously that this is a family with serious money behind it?
Look, this is a regime and a hardcore of the regime with serious money behind it. This is not... of course, we can discuss what the family of Khamenei owns or not owns, but this is not Assad's Syria. This is not Mubarak's Egypt, right? Or Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Whatever the family owns or not, if they get disowned completely, the regime is still going to function. But It is obviously very clear, and there was actually a very good reportage over several weeks by Reuters about 15 years ago about what does the office of the Supreme Leader of Iran economically control in the country. Because all of the religious foundations that exist, some of them exist for thousands of years, some of them were established under the Islamic Republic, i.e. the current regime, all of them didn't have to pay or don't have to pay taxes, but they have to pay a percentage of their profits to the Revolutionary Fund, that's what it's called, of the office of the Supreme Leader, and then the Supreme Leader can decide to do with that money whatever he likes. Traditionally, he's used that to prop up some of the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi Shiites, in coordination with the Revolutionary Guard. So the office of the Supreme Leader has literally hundreds of billions of dollars, both in Iran as well as invested around the world.
Do you see any signs, Hans-Jakob, that the money's running out? Do you see signs that the pressure is coming onto this regime financially? Anything from weapons to people? I know we're looking from afar, but from your conversations with people who are still there, what are you hearing? Are we getting anywhere close to the point where they cannot be so resilient for much longer?
Well, look, I mean, the economic situation has been a disaster before the war even started. It did not get better now that there is a war. There's a problem, shops not being able to open because very interesting. That's one of the other odd thing I'm going to come to in a second. But the real odd thing is that there is no warning system. There was a warning system in Tehran and in all of the cities of Iran during the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s, where via radio, you were warned if there was an air attack. Now, there is no warning whatsoever. Basically, you just don't know what is going to happen, when it's going to happen, and where in any of the cities. This is a very odd thing that the Islamic Republic the regime has not reconstituted that pre-warning system. Really odd. I mean, obviously, they don't seem to be caring too much about how many of their own people are going to die because they just don't give any warnings. The second odd thing is, yes, there's a really dire economic situation, but and this is the real odd thing, for whatever unimaginable reason, while the Iranians are harassing tankers and ships that want to go out of the Persian Gulf or come into the Persian Gulf that are not Iranian, the US military and Navy allows Iranian ships to sail through the Strait of Hormuz in both directions in the last 2 weeks, which means while no one else is being able to export oil and gas, the Iranians are exporting oil and gas, according to the Wall Street Journal, about 2.1 million barrels a day. That is something that should really be stopped right now because this fuels the war machine. It really makes no real dent on the oil price going up or down if the Iranian crude is taken off the market. What really influences the oil price is the Qatari, the Kuwaiti, the UAE, and the Saudi barrels that are off the market, and of course the LNG price, the Qatari LNG that's off the market. Whether or not you got this very specific sulfur-rich Iranian crude leaving the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't really be noticeable on the world market, but it's the lifeline of the regime. If that can be stopped, then the regime will have extreme trouble because not even Chinese refineries are going to pay for crude that they don't receive.
Question from YouTube, Barty6973, Hans-Jakob. Are Iranians still hoping for boots on the ground?
Well, I mean, the discussion is quite complicated. It is very clear, I think, to all of the Iranians that I talk to, both inside Iran and outside Iran, that they are realistic of what is possible here or not, given the political circumstances, but also given the size of the country, or what the Israeli government and the American administration had been saying from the get-go. They had not promised that they are going to remove the regime. They had promised that they're going to weaken the regime sufficiently so that the Iranians themselves can topple the regime and then decide themselves what kind of political system they want to have. A democracy, a monarchy, a whatever. That's not anything that neither the Israeli or the US government have said anything about. So they were only promised a weakened regime and a chance to go to the street and hopefully take it over without being slaughtered. We are nowhere near that point where this would make sense right now, because I cannot see clear signs of actual erosion within the security apparatus. We have seen individual defections of individual soldiers, but nothing really of substance. And as long as that is the case, if people would go to the street today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, it would happen the same way that it happened in December and January, large-scale slaughter, and the state TV has already announced that that's exactly what's going to happen if you go on the streets. If there is some power on the side of the opposition, i.e. weapons and parts of the security apparatus, maybe the police or the regular army, because I don't hold any hope out for the Revolutionary Guards, switching sides, then they have a shot in challenging the regime. That has not happened yet.
Just talking, you're talking about people on the streets and being afraid to come onto the streets. I want to have a listen to a couple of voices. We're just about done with you. You've been really generous with your time. We really appreciate it. So do the audience. We'll come back and ask you a couple of questions more, and then we'll wrap up. But first, I just want to hear from some of these voices inside of Tehran. Stay with us.
We were truly happy our leader stated all the positions of the revolution so decisively in his very first message. He defined the path of the revolution. We support and stand behind him.
For now, it's better for the Strait of Hormuz to remain shut so that the world understands how powerful we are. We have all come to deliver a firm punch to the mouth of the United States, Israel, and global arrogance, and to say that we will always stand behind Islam and our dear leader.
America and Israel, you failed, and you will drown in the swamp you are stuck in. We're proud of the leader of the Muslim world, Grand Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei.
So you hear the people on the street there, Hans-Jakob, talking about Mojtaba Khamenei. Several comments about the rumours that he may be injured, bringing up a possible point. How could Iranians respond to seeing him wounded if and when he does appear in public?
Look, I mean, this is very unusual days. This is not the way it's supposed to be, right? The regime functioned in that they actually nominated a supreme leader, but he's supposed to be visible at one point or the other. I think for the next couple of weeks, they can manage without him being visible. If they cannot bring at least a voice message of the supreme leader, this is going to be an increasing problem. But I don't think in the current situation and understanding, and everyone understands in Iran that he's now number one on the target list, both of Israel and the US. Last night, the US put out a $10 million reward for any information leading to, I guess, his killing. It's clear that he's not going to appear in a public event. That's just, and I don't think that is a problem of the regime if he doesn't. The voice message is really clear. Now, what you really is seen in these three statements is that a reflection of the fact that there is, of course, a hardcore, it's not the majority, but it's not a negligible number of individuals who are absolutely with the regime. These are the Hezbollahis, the Revolutionary Guards, the security apparatus, the justice system. So it's several million people. I mean, 90 million people is the entire country. Even if it's 10 or 20%, that's a lot of people who are still with the regime. And some of those will, of course, be willing to fight until the bitter end. That's why best case scenario here is a weakened regime, a opposition with some means to defend itself, but we are looking towards an internal war, at least for a time, if this regime is supposed to crumble.
Link 1980 asking the question, or do you find it strange that the US is now asking for other countries to join this effort in the Gulf and escort ships? For South Korea, for instance, being asked to send assets to the Gulf as well. Do you find that strange?
Look, I mean, strange or not, it's a truth that Asia is dependent. I mean, the Iranian oil is not going to Europe. It's not going to Africa. It's not going to North America. It's going to Asia. Now, it's really important that this is doable, right? They've done this in 1988, where the US Navy escorted tankers that the Iranians at that time, Kuwaiti tankers at that time, tried to sink. They've done this before in the Iran-Iraq war, where they tried to create trouble in the Strait of Hormuz, pressuring the supporters of Iraq at that time through economic costs. It is not very difficult, but it takes up a lot of resources because every single tanker, every single cargo ship needs an escort. and that escort needs to be protected as well. So it's a lot of equipment. Now, could the US Navy do this? Possibly, yes, but it would leave a lot of other resources that they need to bring to the Gulf, which takes time, and it would take a lot of resources of the US to do that. So the argument from the US administration, correctly or not, is it is as much your problem as it's our problem that the Iranians don't let other ships through. Help us.
I want to just finish by talking one more time about the power structure. I've got something we can share on the screen of just looking at, I'm not sure whether you can see our screen, looking at those 6 people on screen as we speak. In the red, they are those who are no longer with us. That's the lives the strikes have claimed so far. Of those 2 left, Ali Larijani and Masoud Pezeshkian, who is the most important going forward in these next weeks and months? Who's going to be taking the lead here if we think that Khamenei is not available?
Look, I mean, I like and I dislike the graphic that you have. I like it because it's more than one person, so it makes clear it's a regime that is different from classical dictatorship. I don't like it because it looks like all of the collective leadership is dead. That really doesn't matter. For everyone on that screen that is in red, there's already a successor. The regime is built on resilience. They understood what the threats to the regime is. These collective decision-making mechanisms, whether it's Shamkhani or Ali Larijani, it is the structure that is important, right? As I said, the Supreme National Security Council, led by Ali Larijani, he's the secretary, i.e. he sets the agenda, he moderates, brings together the regular army, the regular military, all branches, the Revolutionary Guard, all branches, the Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Interior, the Minister of Intelligence, the President of the country, 2 representatives of the Supreme Leader, the Secretary of the Council, and any other minister that is responsible for the issue that is going to be discussed in that session, which shows you have all, and the head of the judiciary and the Speaker of the Parliament. You have all of the
I've actually got something on screen now, Hans-Jakob, that you like. You might like more the graphic we've got on screen now.
No, it was not a criticism. I just wanted to make that point of collective decision-making and resilience of the structure. It's not a person-centric decision-making structure. Who is the secretary matters to a certain extent of the Supreme National Security Council, but even if it would be he himself fully convinced that he wants to stop the war right now and whatever, give up, he would not be the one who makes the decision. It's the collection of the power centers that will make that decision to however the next step in this war is going to be.
Your feedback is always welcome, Hans-Jakob. So too on both YouTube and TikTok. There is one question here that might take us out. Do you think the USA underestimated Iran? As someone who lived there, who has clear respect for the country and its people, is there something quite simple and elemental to that question? Did the USA underestimate Iran?
If they did underestimate them, then they really didn't take any lessons of the multiple war games that were done in the last 20 years, predicting exactly this outcome. As I said at the very beginning, nothing of what is happening right now is even remotely surprising to anyone who's actually dealt with Iran and went through the various scenarios, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why the Europeans decided to go for the JCPOA rather than a military attack on Iran at that time in the early 2000s. So don't forget, for decades we've been negotiating with the Iranians. So it is not surprising. What they have not done very well is to actually explain the difficulty of doing this. Now, this may be down to tactical considerations. You don't want to scare people at the beginning of a conflict. It may be down to the style of Donald Trump and his administration, who doesn't like very complex things to explain. But it is very clear that what's going on right now is 100% what was expected.
Hans-Jakob, it's been incredible to talk to you and tap your deep knowledge of this subject matter. The audience clearly love the chance to hear from you and ask you some questions as well. We've spoken before on some of the old school TV formats. I'm sure we'll do so again, but it's really great to give our viewers direct access to your knowledge as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks again, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Big thanks to Hans-Jakob Schindler for answering our questions, your questions. I hope we were able to answer some of yours along the way. If you made it this far, you may as well hit that like button as well. And if you haven't already subscribed to help us bring you more of this type of content, huge thanks and shout out to our team here in Berlin, the gallery, the production team. It's been real fun as always. From Berlin to wherever in the world you're watching, it's goodbye for now.